there's a short life in
Why do you think that is? What the creative side is?
Well, because losing out money, you got to take. You're going through so much to try and deal with life.
This is the first time that I'm speaking about it. Something that I'll never forget.
The revelation was nothing short of explosive. Terrence Howard, a man known for his captivating performances and measured demeanor, had dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves rippling through Hollywood. It was the kind of confession that made you sit up and question everything you thought you knew about the industry's glitzy facade. This wasn't just another story of behind-the-scenes drama or a messy feud between co-stars. No, this was something far darker, a chilling deep dive into what Terrence described as one of the most twisted undercurrents of the entertainment world.
Did you ever have the opportunity where you got invited and you said no to it?
Hell yeah.
What was the consequences when you said no?
Puffy invited me for weeks, asking me to come and teach him how to, wanted me to be his acting coach for a while. Go there and he's sitting around just looking. I'm like, okay, what's the material you want to work on? He's just looking at me.
At the heart of the revelation was a name that carried an enormous weight: Sean Diddy Combs. To the public, Diddy was the ultimate mogul, a self-made powerhouse, a visionary who had built an empire spanning music, fashion, and business. But according to Terrence, there was another side to him, a side most people either ignored or refused to believe existed. And it wasn't just whispers anymore. Terrence wasn't being vague or cryptic, he was calling Diddy out by name, and the accusations were as horrifying as they were specific. It all began, Terrence claimed, when Diddy reached out to him under the guise of mentorship. He allegedly wanted acting lessons, a bit of coaching to refine his on-screen presence. On the surface, it seemed innocent enough. After all, plenty of performers transitioned to other mediums and sought guidance from seasoned actors like Terrence. But as Terrence recounted the events, it became clear that this wasn't about acting at all. The so-called lessons were merely a pretext, a thinly veiled attempt to lure him into a situation that would have compromised not just his career, but also his dignity.
Will you help me? I want to hear your music, so I come over there and I play the music. And he's sitting there, just looking at me, like waiting. Okay. So then my assistant was like, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to you. That's what my assistant said. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. So now no more communication.
Terrence described how he had gone to Diddy's house expecting a professional exchange, only to find himself in an environment that felt anything but professional. The details he shared painted a picture that was unnervingly calculated. Diddy, as Terrence alleged, didn't make his intentions clear right away. Instead, he played a game of subtle manipulation, testing boundaries in ways that only became obvious in hindsight. Terrence recalled how Diddy would sit and stare, making vague, almost nonsensical comments that left him feeling uneasy. The supposed acting exercises never materialized. Instead, the conversation would shift in bizarre directions, with Diddy asking to hear Terrence's music or suggesting they hang out the following week. It didn't take long for Terrence to piece together what was really happening. The breaking point came when Terrence's assistant pulled him aside and bluntly told him what many others might have been too afraid to say. According to the assistant, Diddy's intentions were far from professional, and the so-called invitations to hang out were loaded with ulterior motives. That was it for Terrence. He cut all ties immediately, opting to protect his boundaries and his reputation rather than entertain the charade for another moment. But what left him shaken wasn't just Diddy's behavior. It was the realization that this wasn't an isolated incident. According to Terrence, this was part of a larger, more insidious pattern.
A former assistant to Sean Diddy Combs speaking out in the new interview with new allegations about wild parties and
that's where Bryshere Gray's name entered the conversation. Bryshere, best known for his role as Hakeem Lyon on Empire, was once a rising star with an energy and charisma that seemed unstoppable. But as Terrence revealed, there was a side to Bryshere's story that the public never saw, a side that, according to Terrence, had left the young actor emotionally shattered. Bryshere's decline wasn't just a matter of personal struggles or industry pressures. Terrence alleged that it could be traced directly to Diddy's predatory behavior. The details Terrence shared about Bryshere's experience were gut-wrenching. He claimed that Diddy had targeted Bryshere when he was just 17 years old, a time when the young actor was still finding his footing in the entertainment world. Terrence didn't mince words. He described it as a deliberate effort to exploit Bryshere's vulnerability. And the most disturbing part? According to Terrence, Bryshere's own mother, Andrea, had played a role in facilitating the situation.
How does it feel wearing You know, it's some good fabric, but it takes us back to the New Edition days.
Andrea Mayberry, as Terrence alleged, was aware of what was happening to her son, but chose to look the other way. Or worse, actively enabled it. For Andrea, it wasn't about protecting her child, it was about securing a financial future. The implication was that she had struck some kind of deal, allowing Bryshere to be used in exchange for monetary gain. Terrence mentioned how Jaguar Wright, another industry figure known for her no-holds-barred revelations, had first exposed Andrea's alleged complicity. But hearing it directly from Terrence, someone who had worked closely with Bryshere on Empire, gave the claims a new level of gravity.
If you're a halfway intelligent person, when do you start questioning how lucky some keep getting?
Right.
What made the situation even more tragic, Terrence said, was watching Bryshere's transformation over time. He described how, during the early days on set, Bryshere was full of life, ambitious, talented, and eager to succeed. But as the months went by, Terrence noticed a change. Bryshere began to withdraw, his once bright energy dimming into something unrecognizable. By the end of their time working together, Terrence said, it was as if there was nothing left of the young actor he had first met. He spoke of the pain in Bryshere's eyes, the haunted look that told a story far more devastating than words ever could. Terrence didn't hold back when discussing the broader implications of what happened to Bryshere. He described it as a kind of spiritual demise, a loss of something fundamental that could never be regained. He referred to it as losing one's man card, a metaphor that seemed to encapsulate the emotional and psychological toll of such exploitation. For Terrence, this wasn't just about Bryshere. It was about an entire system that thrived on manipulation and control, stripping people of their autonomy and leaving them broken in the process.
Card.
What is that? What do you mean by that?
You give up your ability, your right to being a man. A man don't take it, a man gives it. So when you give up that man card, you don't get that back.
Are you saying what I think you're saying?
No, I'm saying what I'm saying.
But the story didn't end there. Terrence hinted at even darker revelations, suggesting that Bryshere's experience was just the tip of the iceberg. He spoke of other young men in the industry who had faced similar fates, their stories buried under layers of secrecy and fear. He described a culture where power dynamics were leveraged in the most grotesque ways, leaving victims with little recourse and even less hope for justice. As if that weren't enough, Terrence also touched on the role of enablers, those who knew what was happening but chose to stay silent. He called out not just individuals but the entire industry, accusing it of turning a blind eye to behavior that should have been condemned outright. For Terrence, the silence was as damning as the actions themselves, a complicity that allowed the cycle to continue unchecked. And then there was the matter of the alleged tape, a piece of evidence that, if it existed, could blow the lid off the entire scandal. Jaguar Wright had mentioned it before, describing it as a recording that involved not just Diddy and Bryshere, but also other high-profile names. Terrence didn't confirm or deny the tape's existence, but his words carried an air of foreboding, as if to say that the truth was far more sinister than anyone could imagine. With every word Terrence spoke, the weight of his allegations grew heavier. This wasn't just a story about one man's misconduct. It was a window into a world where power and privilege were wielded like weapons, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. And as Terrence's revelations unfolded, it became clear that this was only the beginning. Because for every story that came to light, there were countless others lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered.
He was responsible for Diddy's day-to-day life, so he is able to provide a lot of information about what that life was like. He goes into detail on extensive use.
But if you thought this story couldn't possibly get any darker, buckle up. Because what Terrence hinted at was just the beginning of an unspoken epidemic, a web of exploitation so deeply entrenched in Hollywood's underbelly that it's practically an open secret. And no one, it seems, is untouchable. Not even the so-called kings of the industry, the ones who sit at the top of the food chain, playing puppeteer with careers and lives. What started as a shocking revelation about Bryshere's downfall is now spiraling into a much bigger, much more horrifying picture. And at the center of it all, Diddy, of course, whose reputation, already battered by Terrence's claims, is now being dragged further into the abyss. The reality of Diddy's alleged behavior goes far beyond a single incident or a handful of names. According to multiple accounts, including those from insiders who've quietly come forward in the aftermath of Terrence's bombshell interview, this is a man who thrives on control. And not just any kind of control. We're talking about the kind of psychological domination that leaves people questioning their own worth, their own identity, the kind of control that's wielded not through overt threats, but through a toxic combination of promises, pressure, and power plays.
Good morning, Michael. At this point, we've all probably heard about these infamous parties. Diddy's assistant now giving us details about what he says were called Wild King Nights.
Take, for instance, Diddy's infamous parties. On the surface, they're the stuff of celebrity lore, exclusive gatherings where A-listers rub shoulders, deals are made, and careers are launched. But behind the velvet ropes, there's a much uglier side to these so-called celebrations. Multiple sources have described these events as less about networking and more about submission. It's not just about being seen, it's about being chosen. And once you're chosen, the rules of the game change entirely. Attendees are allegedly expected to do more than just show up. They're expected to play along, no matter how uncomfortable the stakes become. What makes these gatherings even more sinister is the layer of secrecy that surrounds them. Multiple sources have claimed that at these parties, attendees are often required to sign non-disclosure agreements before setting foot inside. But these aren't your standard NDAs. According to one insider, they're ironclad documents that not only prohibit attendees from speaking about what they see or experience, but also impose severe financial penalties for even hinting at the events publicly. And that's just the legal side of it. The social consequences of breaking these agreements are even more chilling. One source recounted how an actress who tried to speak out was blacklisted almost overnight, her roles drying up, her phone calls unreturned. It wasn't just her career that was targeted, her personal life became the subject of a smear campaign, leaving her isolated and defeated.
A lot of times you would have him with a younger female, and there's a power dynamic there. A more impressionable girl is easier to reel in. Consent is between the people that are engaging, and I wasn't there in these situations to understand the consent.
And yet, even with all these measures in place, whispers still escape. Some of the most disturbing accounts describe how Diddy allegedly uses these parties to test the loyalty of those in attendance. One specific allegation involves carefully staged scenarios where guests are pressured into making split-second decisions that could define their future in the industry. For example, one source alleged that attendees were sometimes presented with choices that seemed harmless at first, agreeing to stay late, participating in a group activity, but would escalate into situations that pushed personal boundaries. Those who refused or hesitated often found themselves ostracized, their names quietly removed from invitation lists and opportunities alike. For Diddy, it wasn't just about the moment, it was about identifying who could be trusted to follow his rules without question. And the rules don't just apply to aspiring stars or newcomers hoping to break into the industry. Even established names have found themselves ensnared in Diddy's web. One insider recounted a chilling moment at one of these parties where a well-known actor, someone whose name would instantly light up headlines, was allegedly cornered by Diddy and a group of his associates. The actor, according to the source, was given an ultimatum: comply or face the consequences. What those consequences were exactly remains unclear, but the implication was enough to leave the actor visibly shaken, retreating into silence for the rest of the night. And this, apparently, was not an isolated incident.
In the moment, it just felt like, what? Like, is this fun for him? Is this like a test?
Then there's the matter of Diddy's so-called mentorship. For years, he's portrayed himself as a guiding force for young talent, someone who takes rising stars under his wing and helps them navigate the treacherous waters of fame. But according to several former protégés, that mentorship comes at a steep price. One musician, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, described how Diddy's mentorship quickly turned into something far more invasive. It wasn't just about offering advice or opening doors, it was about testing boundaries, pushing limits, and blurring lines in ways that left the artist feeling trapped and manipulated. And let's not forget the allegations surrounding Diddy's control over his inner circle. Several former employees have alleged that working for him was less like having a job and more like being part of a cult. Employees were reportedly expected to be on call 24/7, ready to drop everything at a moment's notice to cater to his whims. And those whims, according to the allegations, often cross professional boundaries. One former assistant claimed that they were frequently asked to procure entertainment for Diddy's private gatherings, an ambiguous term that, according to the assistant, could mean anything from hiring performers to finding people willing to participate in ways that were never explicitly stated but heavily implied.
And I know you said he explained all of the items that were involved in these Wild King Nights. Did he mention who would participate as well?
A lot of them were unknown to him. He did mention that a lot of the women were very, very young as 20, not underage, but certainly.
But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these allegations is the way they seem to follow a pattern. time and time again, the same themes emerge: control, exploitation, and a chilling disregard for boundaries. Even more troubling is the way these stories often end, with the victims withdrawn from the public eye, their careers derailed, their voices silenced. It's a pattern that suggests not just a series of isolated incidents, but a systemic problem that's been allowed to fester unchecked for years. And yet, despite the mounting allegations, Diddy has managed to maintain his position at the top of the industry. How? According to insiders, it's all about leverage. One source described how Diddy allegedly keeps a black book, a collection of secrets and dirt on some of the biggest names in Hollywood. It's the kind of leverage that can make or break a career, the kind that ensures loyalty through fear rather than respect. And if the rumors are true, that book contains enough explosive information to send shockwaves through the entire industry.
Did Phil explain why he's speaking out now?
He said he's speaking out because he believes Diddy's a predator. He wants accountability, and he doesn't want someone like this to run unchecked in the future.
But here's the kicker. It's not just Diddy who's implicated in this web of exploitation. According to Jaguar Wright, there are others, powerful figures who've allegedly participated in or enabled the same kind of behavior. Names that, if revealed, would send the entertainment world into a full-blown meltdown. Wright has hinted at high-profile collaborations, secret deals, and even recordings that could expose the extent of the problem. And while she's yet to provide concrete evidence, her claims have already sent ripples through the industry, with many wondering just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
That was all the people that went to the puffy parties. That was all the people that did all those things thinking that there was never going to be a consequence for what they were doing. Get punked out and pimped out by some greater desire. You shouldn't have a greater desire than being a man. So I believe that's a big problem with a lot of the actors out there because they get fluid. And next thing you know, once you go fluid,
All of this begs the question, why now? Why are these stories coming to light after years, even decades of silence? Some insiders believe it's a matter of timing, a perfect storm of shifting cultural attitudes, growing public awareness, and a few brave individuals willing to speak out. Others suggest that the walls are finally closing in on Diddy and those like him, as the industry begins to reckon with its darkest secrets. But if there's one thing that's clear, it's that this story is far from over. With every new revelation, every new allegation, the stakes continue to rise. And as more voices come forward, the pressure on Diddy and the entire industry is reaching a boiling point. So what happens next? Will this be the moment that finally brings accountability to an industry long plagued by abuse and manipulation? Or will the powerful forces at play find a way to bury the truth once again? Let us know what you think down below. Are we finally seeing the cracks in Hollywood's armor, or is this just another chapter in an endless cycle of scandal and silence? And more importantly, who's next? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.